the Zionists or Israeli officials would try to conflate anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism, and especially here in the West, liberal Zionists would say, okay, you can be anti-Netanyahu, you can criticize Israel, but anti-Zionism, that's where we draw the line. That's where it becomes anti-Semitism, opposing the Jewish right to self-determination. But today we see that it's not only anti-Zionism, it's simply criticizing Benjamin Netanyahu for committing war crimes. What does that say about the state of Zionism and its use of that term to demonize its opponents today?
Look, there's a place which, I'll be honest to you and your listeners, I wish I could go to, which would be to say, look, Zionism is something which is very simple. We don't have to go there because it's just a Jewish right to self-determination. There are all kinds of Zionism. There was binational Zionism, cultural Zionism, as well as political Zionism. It's 2024. There is an experience of actual existing Zionism. People may want to portray this as an uncontroversial assertion that Jews have the same rights as others, which they do, but you don't have the right to realize a political ideology in practice which has meant the relentless dispossession of another people, the denial of that other people's basic rights and freedoms, and that it is above reproach, that it cannot be challenged. It's an ideology. It's an ideology when put into practice has led to where we are today. That wasn't inevitable, but from the inception of the actualization, you had the Nakba, you had the military government imposed on those who were not expelled between 1948 and 1966. You had territorial expansionism. So if Zionism wants to redefine itself, I think that will be hard for lots of people to swallow. But nothing's stopping Zionism from saying, no, we took a terrible wrong turn. How do we make good on, the historical injustices? How can we have a truth and reconciliation process around what happened in the Nakba and also things that happened to Jewish people, Israeli Jewish people? How can we offer restitution? How can there be return? How can the wrongs of today's apartheid be undone so that there is a future that looks different for Israeli Jews, not based on an ethno-nationalist supremacist regime? And we would like to call that Zionism. I think that'd be a really hard swallow for many people. But that is a way of going about proving that Zionism is not these things it is being accused of. But there is no such attempt. And there is no getting away from the legitimacy of describing in historically accurate, factual terms what has been done in the name of that ideology, and the idea that there can only be one legitimate expression of Jewish collective will is ahistorical. In Jewish terms, it would be untrue of any people. No one's a monolith. Today, there is a growing community of Jewish people who, and we've seen them on the streets, in the protests, speaking out. We've seen us, if I can say that, who are making the assertion that this is not who we are and this is not good for our people. Historically, Zionism was a minority trend. Even in the contemporary era in which there was Zionism, historically Jews were divided in multiple ways. There were very particular circumstances in which Zionism became not only a majority thing which was supported, but almost consensual, but not quite. And that thread of dissent has been important throughout. Those were the unique post-Holocaust circumstances. But to be a robust response to the Holocaust, Zionism had to offer what was written on the tin. At least the bit that was written on the tin, which said, this is a better way to guarantee Jewish security. But if it was going to be at the expense of another people's security, By the way, not the people who were committing the crimes against Jews in the middle of the last century, right? If it was going to be in that part of the world, at the expense of the rights of people who lived in that part of the world, who live in that part of the world, then it was never going to be the way forward. It could have come to terms with that contradiction theoretically. It didn't. And where we are today is that the actions of Israel for decades, but in an accelerated fashion in the last year, are making it impossible for there to be a future for that ethno-nationalist state in that part of the world. And it is Israel's actions which is creating the on-ramp to a binary, which is either you're going to try and save this state, or you're going to look for the well-being of the Israeli Jewish people who live in that state. But at the moment, you're making it inconceivable that you can achieve both. And I want to say something very clearly here. The largest Jewish community, I've mentioned this, the largest Jewish community in the world today does live in Israel. So I would argue that if one is interested in the well-being of Jewish people, one has to be interested in the well-being of that community. Now, I realize while these crimes are going on in the name of that community, by a government voted in by that community, without significant protest from that community, that is a hard thought for many people to hold. But it is a truism that there is going to have to be, in a post-supremacist regime future, a place for Israeli Jews not to conduct themselves in genocidal ways, not to conduct their daily lives at the expense of the daily lives, well-being, rights and freedoms of Palestinians. But I don't think the right way forward is to say this has to be an Algeria solution. It has to look more like, and these analogies are always going to be highly imperfect, a South Africa solution, albeit the apartheid regime did not commit the kind of crimes we're seeing today, is what South African ANC comrades will tell you. But a kind of outcome where there is a place that will offer more security for that Israeli Jewish community, but not as the lords of the land, not as those who run a regime that is a supremacist regime in which they have rights and others are denied rights. They have security and others are denied security, because that doesn't work out anywhere in the world.